Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Premier Chess Adult Beginner Winter 2021 class, and this is week um, 5, I believe. Is this week 5 or week 4? I'm getting confused now. Anyway, one of those, and we're going to be discussing a game. We're going to be practicing our end games today. So this is a game that we're going to learn about the power of the bishop pair in the end game. So very instructive game here. But before we do that, we're doing a puzzle here. White to move.
Is the best move the rook at c2 takes the rook at a2?
Okay, so yes. So first of all, remember when we look at puzzles, the first thing we look at is what? What's the first thing we look at? What's the first type of move? Most forceful move.
Something that does check.
There you go, Nancy. Now I see.
There we go. All right, I'm in.
Yeah, so checks are the most forceful move, right? So let's look at checks. Queen f8 is a check. That doesn't do much. So you just lose your queen. Queen b8 is a check. Again, you just lose your queen for no particular reason. Okay, so that's ruled out. Now we look at capture. So we just looked at the capture of the queen, and we said that doesn't really result in much. So now let's look at capture here. So let's say rook takes a2. Now the rook can take back, and it's just going to lead to equality. So if white tries to take the queen, again, he does this intermezzo, and it's going to lead to equality. So what we have to do is let's look at something else. So now white to move here, there's a stronger move than taking the queen or taking the rook. Anybody see stronger move?
I'm sorry, if you're here and queen moves to b1, b8, that's check.
Check, yep.
And then the next move, I see.
The king goes to h7, okay.
Yep. And then if the rook takes, and then the queen comes down to b1 check.
And what's that?
And then b1 check.
And why is that? What are you hoping to achieve with that?
And then you take your rook, takes his rook or her rook at a2.
Good, very good. You saw it. So queen b8 check forces the king onto h7. Now we're lined up for a beautiful fork. Right? Everybody see that? A very nice fork there.
And I'd take with a queen.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you take with, but the point is now white is up an entire rook, right? So very nice. Everybody see that? So very important to see, in these kind of positions, these are very open positions. So what you have to keep in mind is, if the queen drops down to b, if we get rid of this rook here from the 8th rank, then we can bring the queen onto b8, and that will force the king onto h7. So keep that in mind. When you're calculating, you can if you get your queen to b8, you force the king to h7, and so now you have a check here, so that you can use in the future. So that's something good to keep in mind. All right, so let's look at this game. So this is a game between, one moment. This is between Edmar Mednis, Grandmaster Mednis, and Westerinen in Solznok, 1975. Solznok, Hungary. This is the Hungarian International Tournament. And just a little description of this game. This game was awarded the best endgame prize, and the prize was a large and beautiful Hungarian porcelain vase, which, as Mednis later stated, I generously transferred to my wife's ownership. I thought you would all appreciate that. So let's go into the game. What a nice grandmaster husband, right?
What a smart husband.
Yeah. So I guess the end game prize was more of symbolic for him. All right, so let's look at the game. So Mednis is white. All right, so basic opening, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Okay, basic opening. So bishop bishop to b5 would be what opening? Anybody know the name of that opening?
Are you moving pieces?
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry about that. My fault. Let's go back. Okay. Sorry about that. E4, E5. Everybody can see that now, right?
Mhm.
Good. All right. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6. So now in the game, he played bishop C4, but my question was, what if he played bishop B5? What's the name of this opening? Anybody know?
Where Lopez?
Luis Lopez, or also known as the Spanish game. Okay, so bishop C4, which is usually so here what black played is bishop E7. It's kind of a rare, it's kind of a rare opening. It looks kind of weird, very passive. This is actually kind of called the Hungarian opening. So Mednis was like, maybe you're doing a hat tip to the fact that they were playing this game in Hungary. I don't know, but yeah, other acceptable openings moves would be bishop C5 or knight F6. Pretty standard. Okay, bishop E7, D4 straight to center, D6 protect the pawn, D takes. And now he takes back with the pawn. Now, let me ask you guys a quick question here. What if he took back with the knight? Because that's actually a mistake. Why would that be a mistake? So Mednis would take here. Now, what can white do here? That would be a small mistake.
Queen take queen.
Okay, so you can take the queen. It doesn't really do much though. Now it's kind of equal. So we need a stronger move than taking the queen. What do you think?
Oh, sorry, queen to F3.
Queen to F3. Okay, so you're trying to threaten F7 pawn. Okay, he can just block this way. Very easy, very simple. And then castle next move, and he's pretty safe. So we need a stronger move than that. What do you think? I'll say you're close, Michael. There's not that many pieces we could use, right, for white. We need a attacking move here.
Well, if bishop takes F2, F7.
Okay, you can sacrifice the bishop. It doesn't really do much, though. The queen is protected by the bishop, right? So it doesn't do much. Yeah, the stronger move here. Anybody see it?
Hmm.
It's an attacking move. So let's do some process of elimination. This rook, not going anywhere. Probably not that rook. How about this rook? Probably not. This knight? No, too far. This bishop, anything along this diagonal? No, it doesn't look like anything. This bishop, you can do a check here. Doesn't do much after C6. Nothing really exciting here. And he can take here, but that's no good. Now we're left with a queen. Has to be a queen move. What do you think? Strong position for queen. Where?
I have an idea for a move, but it doesn't take, it just positions.
So what move do you have?
Queen to H5.
Yeah, queen H5. Remember, I'm always talking about the sensitive diagonal here, right? The E8 to H5 diagonal. And the bishop is already targeting F7. So why is this more powerful than queen F3? Does anybody see why?
Because if the queen takes the pawn, the king can't take the queen back because it would put itself in check. No?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, queen H5 and queen F3 are both threatening queen on F7. But I'm saying, why is queen H5 stronger than queen F3? What do you guys think? What do you guys think?
Well, it pins the pawn to the king.
Okay, it's pinned. That's true. What else?
The black queen can't threaten because it's blocked by the pawn. If it were to go down to D3, if the white queen were on F3.
Yeah. The black queen doesn't have much mobility, right? Only can go. Oh, we got. Oh, that's Roy. Oh yeah, we're missing Roy. So yeah, black queen doesn't have much. So the reason that queen H5 is stronger slightly is because we are attacking F7 and e5 simultaneously, right? So we're attacking, we're threatening 2 pawns, and there's really no way that black can save both. So the e5 pawn will fall, right? So, which is a very important thing in a grandmaster game when one of them is up a pawn. That usually decides the game. All right, so d takes. So he takes back with the pawn, and he goes bishop d5. Does anybody have any idea why he went bishop d5? Hi, Roy.
Hi, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Welcome. Just gonna rename you, so I'm not gonna call you R. Stillman at Stillman Management. Okay.
What is the subject of this?
So we're going over a game, 1975 Mednis versus Westerinen, and this is going to be we're going to be talking about power of the bishops, the bishop pair in the end game. So what's the reason that he played bishop d5? Anybody have any idea? It's a pretty simple reason, actually.
Is he going to attack f7?
What is the well, he's already putting pressure on f7. What is the knight defending?
The rook.
Oh no, what's the knight defending? The knight's defending something.
The pawn.
Yeah, the pawn on e5, right? The central pawn, very important, right? We always say control the center as much as possible. So he's putting direct pressure on the piece that defends the pawn, threatening to win the pawn, right? So very simple idea with that move. Okay. All right. So bishop d6, knight g5. So now he's directly threatening with his knight and his bishop on f7. So he goes knight h6 to block that. C3. I guess he doesn't like any invasion on b4 or d4. Okay. Queen f6. So now white doesn't really like the fact that black is trying to activate his queen. So he says, I'm going to oppose you and offer queen trade. Black accepts, queen takes, knight takes. So knight g4. Why did he do that move? Why do you think he went knight g4? What was white kind of threatening, kind of?
Isn't he afraid that the black bishop will take that knight, double the pawn on the H file, and still?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So bishop takes h6, g takes, and leaves black with doubled isolated pawns, which is a very big weakness, right? So master players are very acutely sensitive to that kind of thing. They don't like it. So he says, no, don't do that to me. Knight g4, knight b d2, knight d8, castle, knight f6. And of course, also grandmasters very much like their bishops. They do not want to trade their bishops, especially for a knight. So if they can, they'll keep it on the board, which is what he did. Bishop b3, b5. Now, the reason for b5 was actually this was kind of like an inaccuracy because it really severely weakens the squares on the queen side, but the reason that black played b5 was to prevent any kind of the knight from jumping onto c4, right? He didn't want that activate this knight, so he tried to prevent it with b5. But it's a very weakening move, and we'll see why. Now we have a4. So now we're going to be able to, white's going to be able to open up his rook, which is very, very nice for white. C6. So he opens up the rook. Okay, so now we have a nice open A file for the rook to work with. C4 is a nice move also. I mean, it kind of looks like it blocks the bishop, but we're going to see he's going to sacrifice this pawn a little bit. All right, B4, bishop A3, A4 check. Okay, so now this was kind of deemed as an inaccuracy as well, because even though the queens are not on the board, this is not necessarily an end game yet, right? There's still a lot of pieces, and therefore there's still a possibility of checkmate. So there can be mating threats against the king. So it was not deemed a good move to move the king. Better was to seek safety with castling, but that's what he did. So c5. So now he sacrifices one pawn to, actually, no, he's not. It's not a sacrifice. It's kind of, you can say, a deflective. He's deflecting the bishop he's trading the c pawn for the e pawn. You see that? So he takes the bishop takes c5, knight takes, right? And now the c4 square is open for this knight to jump in and become active. All right, bishop e7, knight d3. Okay, so let's continue. So, all right, a little bit of maneuvering here. Okay, so what's the reason why he took there? First of all, again, remember I said grandmasters really like to trade their opponent's bishops and keep their own as much as possible. So the reason he did that was now he's got a beautiful outpost for the knight, right? You see this knight in black's camp. It's causing all kinds of problems and exerting a lot of pressure in all different ways, right? The very powerful position for the knight. So that's juicy. Okay, rook c7, bishop c2, bishop c6. Okay, rook a5, knight b7. So yeah, so here it was deemed later that the best move for black would have been a5, right? Because hold on, let's go back. Yeah, right here in this position would have been a5 to prevent the rook from coming onto a5 and exerting pressure on these pieces, right? So and now the a pawn very nicely defends the b pawn. So now these pawns are very nice and healthy and connected, right? Whereas in the game, now the rook occupies the a5 square. The pawn is not allowed to come to a5, and so this pawn is a little bit overextended, it appears, and weak. Okay, knight b7, knight takes, bishop takes, and now we're getting closer to the end game. We have the bishop pair for white, right? And we're going to see how powerful that's going to be. Bishop b3. Rook d7 is the best move. Now, let me see if you guys can spot it. Why is knight b6 would have been a mistake? What can white do here? Knight b6 would have been a mistake. What do you think?
Well, he opens up all the D for the rook.
The d file, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, that's one reason. Okay, what else? Why is knight b6 a mistake?
Because the bishop can take the pawn on f7.
No, the king's protecting pretty well.
Yeah, but then you could move the white pawn up.
Okay, so take, and then
Yeah.
where's the compensation? There's no. I mean, you can do that. He takes.
There. Oh,
Yeah. There's a stronger move than that. What else? Anybody else? Any ideas?
About the white bishop to e3.
Bishop e3. Okay, that's a nice active location, but remember I said the reason that the rook is here is to prevent the a pawn from advancing to a5, protecting his brother on b4. So now, because the a pawn cannot advance, this b4 pawn is weak. So how do we take advantage of that?
Oh, move the rook to b5.
Okay, so you can move the rook to b5. That is, however, another mistake on white's part. That's a mistake on white's part. Why? What can black do here?
Threaten with his rook.
On what square?
C5.
Rook, no, then you just lose your rook.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? Why is rook b5 a mistake?
Where you can threaten the rook if you move the black bishop to c5. C6.
C6.
If you move the black bishop to a6.
Yeah, a6. So yeah, so bishop c6, and he just takes, and white just won a pawn. But the reason that rook b5 was a mistake. Now look at these rooks are lined up on the light squares, right? Beautiful skewer for the bishop to come and win one of the rooks, right? So we don't want to allow that. So we want to win this pawn. What's another way you can win this pawn? This pawn is weak and overextended.
Bishop to d2.
Bishop D2, yeah, very quiet move. And there is no way that black can defend this overextended pawn, and white will be up a clean pawn, right? Very beautiful. You know, these bishops are very powerful. Double bishop pair, and especially this is a very open position, long diagonals. So the bishops are very powerful. Okay, so that's the reason why knight b6 was a mistake. Therefore, he played rook d7. And now white piles on the d file, rook d1, and now he played knight b6 anyway. Rook takes, knight takes, and the pawn is lost. See, the pawn cannot be protected, so he was bound to lose the pawn anyway. So bishop d2, bishop c6, bishop takes b4, king e8, bishop d6. Very nice. Very nice move. So what in this position, what was black threatening to do? What do you guys think? What is black threatening to do here? Oh, sorry, not this position. Actually, in this position, yeah. What is black threatening to do here?
Rook to b8.
Yeah, rook to b8 would result in winning one of the bishops, right? Both these bishops are unprotected, right? So for that reason, he went bishop d6. Now, you could also do bishop c3, although that's a little bit more passive, and you don't want to do that. If you can, always put your pieces in active locations, right? So bishop d6 very powerfully controls the entire board pretty much, protects the pawn, prevents the rook from coming onto b8, and removes all these squares from the king. So very, very, very useful and powerful position, central position for the bishop. All right, so let's continue. Oh, sorry. Knight f8, rook c5, bishop d7. Now the other bishop comes in. Very nice central. Look at these. Look at both these bishops completely dominating the board, right? Everybody can see this. This is the power of the bishop pair, right? I think Gary Kasparov said that having the bishop pair is being up the mini exchange. It's almost like you're winning a material when you have the bishop pair. They're that powerful. Okay, so rook c8. Take. Okay, so now we're in an end game. Now we're in a bishop pair end game, double bishop pair versus bishop and knight. Okay, f4. So now white is ahead one pawn, right? I'm sure if you guys are playing this game, you would say, I know exactly how to win ahead one pawn, right? No, this is a very complicated way. It's a very complicated position, and it requires. Say again.
I'm sorry, Daniel. Can you go back to that bishop rook exchange?
Yeah. Let's go back.
Pardon me. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So here.
It was a rook for rook exchange.
Yep. Yeah, rook.
Okay.
Yeah. Just exchanging off the
Okay.
rooks. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so f4. So yeah, by the way, this is a double bishop end game with up one pawn. This is very difficult to win. Very easy to draw if the winning the person who's ahead of pawn makes even the slightest mistake. So yeah, very interesting. All right, so let's see how this went. So knight e6. Also, by the way, when you're playing this, and let's say you're the winning side, let's say you have the double bishops and you have the pawn. If your opponent can get into an end game of bishops of opposite colors, does that anybody know what that term means? Bishop of opposite color end game?
If I were to guess, it means that your bishop is on a different color square from the other person's bishop.
Yeah. So if I have a dark square bishop, you have a light square bishop, right? Or vice versa. And that's notoriously easy to draw, right? Even if the person is down one pawn, sometimes even if the person is down two pawns, if they're skillful, they can still draw, right? So it's very stubborn. It's a very stubborn situation to get into, and you definitely want to avoid that. So in this position, taking the knight would be a big mistake. Big mistake. Now, guess what? Bishops of opposite colors, even though he's up a pawn, this will likely be a draw, right? So be very careful. Do not make unnecessary exchanges, right? So knight e6, threatening the pawn. So he goes g3. I love this pawn chain, right? I'm a big salute. I'm a big pawn chain fan. So yeah, All right, so bishop d7. So now it looks like black is pretty he's trying to make like a fortress, right, to try to prevent white from coming in and invading, right? So how do we get in there? So it's you got to kind of finesse and maneuver. It's kind of a interesting little dance. So first thing we have to do though is when we get to end games, remember how the king changes, right? In the opening and middle game, how do you treat the king? How do you treat the king in the opening and the middle game?
Protect them.
the king.
Yeah, you got to protect him, right? Because there's a lot of pieces, so a lot of mate threats on the board. And so you hide him away, safely tucked behind a wall of pawns, right? However, at the end of the middle game and in the end game, the king becomes a very powerful attacking piece. You need to get him out and have him help in your game and converting it to a win, right? So very important to get the king out. So these pawns are very nicely placed, very strong. So now we start to get the king out. Bishop e5, continue activating the king, king e3, g6, bishop b8 is very nice. Now what the reason he chose that was, even though the bishop was doing a good job here, he wants to get the bishop down here, kind of, right? So he wants to reroute the bishop this way, right? So that was the idea of that. And so bishop b8 is it's kind of doing that with tempo, right? What does that mean? What does that mean with tempo when I say that? Anybody know? What does that mean? Moving with tempo. Anybody know that?
You gain the initiative.
Yeah, so you move to improve the position of your pieces at the same time as attacking, right? So your opponent basically has to respond to your attack, right? So immediately the bishop is attacking the pawn on a7. So black has to spend one move, just getting that out of the way. So now we go g4. Now this is the idea. We have to get these pawns moving, and it's very important that when you get them moving in this kind of endgame, that they don't become stuck or rigid. You know, you don't want to allow your opponent to create a blockade. Very, very important. So g5, and the goal is f5, kick away the knight, and then maybe bring the king around, something like this, and then keep pushing. And then with the help of these two bishops, we will dislodge the king and become a queen. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. So knight g7 and bishop a7. Okay, so now here, bishop a7 was a mistake. I'm going to show you how this is a mistake. This is a very subtle mistake. Very few people would pick up on why bishop a7 is a mistake, but it was kind of a big mistake. Now, the reason is white wants to keep these pawns fluid, right? So he wants to keep them mobile like this, right? So now what black can do after bishop h7, which black did not capitalize on, he didn't see that this was a mistake, he could go h5. Okay, now why is this a powerful move? Now, do you guys think that g5 would be a good response to h5? What do you guys think?
He's stagnant.
Yeah, now look at these pawns. Now they're not fluid anymore. There's a big hole here, and the bishop controls the dark squares along with the knight. So this is very difficult to proceed and progress, right? So you don't want to stagnate your pawns like this. So now the other option besides pushing, if you take that kind of leads to the same thing. Now there's still a hole here, and it's kind of difficult. So what white wants to do is like keep his pawns fluid this way. So if he takes, white will take. However, black has a nice move here, bishop f1, and this pawn is loose. There's no way to protect it. If he pushes, this pawn is lost on g4. So it's kind of yeah, it's considered this is kind of like a positional mistake. So what he should have played prior to bishop a7, because he definitely wants to push h3, so he should have played king f3. So now if h5, we have h3, and now bishop f1 is met with king g3. And now you see how the pawns are nice and fluid, right? He still retains the ability to push on f5 and get his pawns moving like that. Okay, so very subtle mistake that these grandmasters make. It's kind of funny, it's like I'm sure a lot of you are like, when I make a mistake, it's pretty obvious, but these grandmasters make a mistake, they're like 5 moves ahead this is what's going to happen because I made this positional mistake. It's kind of funny. All right. So let's go back to the game. So knight g7, bishop a7. So white did not capitalize, or sorry, black did not capitalize a mistake. h5, g takes. Okay. Okay. H takes, knight takes h5, king f3. Okay, so now it's different. Now the position is different since the pawns cannot move fluidly. Like white would love this pawn to be here, right? To have all these pawns connected, but now we have an isolated H pawn and we have these two connected pawns. Now this is going to be a little bit more difficult to push through. Okay, so now let's see. So now the knight goes back, attempting to establish a blockade, right? Not allow these pawns to proceed. Okay, so now there's an interesting little trick that black missed in this position. So I'll just show you guys because this is hard to find. Bishop, oh sorry, my fault. Bishop to e2 check is a little trick. Anybody see why that works? How is that a good move?
There's a knight's fork coming up.
Yeah, so the king wants to go to g4 and g5 and invade that way and help this pawn push up. So now bishop e2 is very annoying, not allowing him to go. If he takes here, now the knight comes into f4, forking the bishop and king and winning a pawn in the process, right? And play can continue this way, and now knights are very difficult and tricky because now there's always knight forks in all these different positions. If he goes, if white tries to go king c5, we have another knight fork here. This is like a triple fork with all these pawns. So the knights are very, very tricky. So yeah, but black missed that little trick, and he went knight g7, bishop b6, knight e6, again establishing a nice blockade here. Bishop e4, so wanting to push on f4, get the pawns moving. King d7, king g4. Now let me ask you guys a question. Why would f5 be a positional mistake? It's not like a mistake like he loses material, but it's a positional mistake. Can anybody see it?
For one thing, there's no immediate defense against the knight fork on g5.
Yeah, so remember, black is down a pawn, right? So he would love to trade down and end up in a bishops of opposite color endgame, which he could definitely do with knight g5, trade here. And now look, bishops opposite colors. White is ahead one pawn, but notoriously difficult to win. And this will most likely be a draw, right? So, yeah, there's no way to make progress here. So therefore, f5 would be a positional mistake. Okay, so instead of, before you go f5, he was bishop king g4. Okay, bishop e2 check. So you could block with the bishop. That's fine. Although he didn't do that, he chose king g3. Knight g7 again. See, you see how difficult it's very difficult for white to make progress here. But he needs his king to come around and invade along the dark squares, right? So black is really trying to get him to trying to prevent him from doing that. But he's one move too late here. King h4, bishop c4, bishop a5, king e8, and now, okay, bishop. Okay, so the reason that he had to do bishop d2 instead of going here. Anybody see why? So if he went let's say he went here, if he went king g5 now black can push him back with knight e6. So now he can't invade because he's going to lose his f pawn, right? He would have to come back, and then he can even push him back further this way. So yeah. So for that reason, he wants to go the king to invade on the dark squares. So first he protects his pawn on f4, and then he continues. Knight f5 check, king g5, king f8, king f6. Now look at this beautiful. So he could have taken here and won a pawn, but he wanted to improve his king first, right? So he goes king f6. Now look at this. Look at the complete difference in king activity between the two kings, right? Completely passive, the black king, very active and dominating the white king, right? The black king is on the 8th rank. You can't go any further. So very dominating position. All right, king g8. So black has resigned himself. He's going to lose this pawn. So bishop takes. So now we have achieved a bishop of opposite color endgames. However, now white is ahead 2 pawns, right? So he's going to demonstrate that this can be won in this position. Every position is different, of course, but in this position, he can do it with 2 pawns ahead. So let's see. King g7, bishop c3, bishop e6, king g5. So now white wants to start pushing this pawn, right? So for that reason, black chooses to blockade the pawn as much as possible. He wants to not allow the pawn to move. So now we have f5, get the pawns moving. So now black goes f6. Why does he do f6? Why do you guys think? He just loses the pawn, right? Pawn sacrifice.
We wanted to prevent the bishop from putting the king in check.
Okay, yeah, that's one reason. Okay, what's another reason he did f6? What do you think?
Wants to double white's pawns.
Yeah, so again, pawns are very strong and fluid when they're side by side. They can protect each other. So white is basically forcing the doubling of the f pawns. So now these are isolated doubled pawns, much weaker, and so black is hoping that he can somehow create a blockade and still draw the position, right? So he sacrifices f pawn, king f7, bishop b4. So now how do we win this? So now this is a very interesting position. Look at this position. Bishop b4 was a very, very good move, very subtle and very powerful move. Why? What is black's best move here? What do you guys think? Does black have a good move?
No.
No, right? This pawn cannot move. What if he moves the bishop anywhere? Then what will white do?
Well, it would open up the file.
Yeah, so he wants to push
For
this
the
pawn,
pawn.
right? He wants to get the
Yeah.
pawn moving. So the reason the bishop is here is blockading the pawn. So he can't move his pawn. He can't move his bishop. What if he moves his king? Let's say he goes to king g8. Best move here for white. What do you think?
He should advance his king.
Right.
King to g6.
Yeah.
And there's no way to prevent the pawn from promoting. And very importantly, bishop b4 was a subtle move because it keeps an eye on a5, preventing the pawn from moving at the same time as controlling the promotion square, right? Very powerful move. So yeah, these little moves like this in these end games, they mean all the difference. They mean all the difference, right? So in this position, black has no good moves. And what is the term that we call that state of being in chess when you have no good moves and all your moves are bad?
Oh, that word.
One of the Z words.
There's two Z words. One of them I pronounced much worse than the other one. You remember which one it was? Anybody?
Zugzwang.
Zugzwang. Yeah, this black is in a state of Zugzwang right now. He has no good moves, right? So he chose to move his bishop. And so white got the pawn moving. Bishop d5, h5, king g8, h6. So now he has to head over to h7 to blockade the pawn, right? Because if he doesn't do anything, the pawn is just going to continue and it's going to be no good, right? So yeah, so again, if he goes here, winning would be h7, and now these pawns are controlling both g7 and h7, and there's no way to stop the pawn, right? So he's got a blockade with his king. All right, so now bishop. So now he protects the bishop, protects the pawn. So now what is white's plan here? What do you think is the best plan for white here? what would you do?
Pawn to B3.
No, you just lose. You just lose
Oh,
it.
that's right.
Yeah. What's the best move here? Any ideas?
What about pawn to B4?
Okay, so pawn b4. All right, you could do that. Let's see here. I mean, he would probably want to just push his pawn. And now
Oh,
this pawn is
That's a
dangerous. You know,
disaster.
yeah. Now you're allowing him to get a protected or pass pawn, so that's no good. Okay, what else?
About F7.
Oh, f7 here. Okay, here. Well, you just lose this pawn. Let's see. Maybe you go here. Actually, that might still be winning, but I don't think it's not necessary to sacrifice a pawn just yet, right? Eventually you will, but not just yet. So remember, in these end games, what are you always trying to do with your king? You're always trying to activate your king, right? So this king is in a good position, but he can actually be in a better position. Where do you think the king wants to be?
H5.
Okay,
Again,
h5 doesn't really do much. There's a stronger move
Couldn't
than
think
that.
of any other alternatives.
G6. G6.
Well, he can't go to g6 because of the king.
Well, but the king can't move there because of the white pawn, right? Because of the pawn on F5.
Yeah. So f5 is controlling g6, yeah. But so
But
my
I
question,
mean, the king can't move into,
Can't put himself in check.
can't put himself in check.
yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't move next to the king, right? So where would this king, if you can place him anywhere on the board, where would you want to place him here in this position?
7.
Say again.
7.
You say e7?
Or F7.
f7. Well, f7 you can't because of the bishop. So here e7 would be the best possible location for the king, right? You want to assist the f pawn in moving up, right? So for that reason, he walks his king to e7. He takes a little stroll. Little stroll in the park, right? King e4, king f4. So now the h6 pawn is nicely protected. So this king's not going anywhere. So these pawns are pretty safe. So he's like, I'm just gonna walk around, take a walk in the park. There you go. King e5, bishop b3, bishop, king d6, king g8, and king e7. We finally arrived at king e7. So now bishop c4. Okay, so now the question is, how do we win in this position? How do we win? So it's white to move. What do you think?
F7.
Okay, so now let's look at f7. So f7 check. So if the king moves to h7, we can go. So we want to vacate the promotion square, right? So we go bishop g, bishop g7. But now here in this position, black has a trick. Black has a little trick here. Bishop takes f7. So one thing that you got to be careful of is how do you say? I forget the name, but it's like when you can threaten your opponent with stalemate, right? So black is clearly losing, right, in this position, 3 pawns down, but he can save himself in this position with bishop takes f7, and if king takes f7, now we go a3, and what if the pawn takes the pawn? Now what?
King has nowhere to go.
Stalemate, draw. You got to be careful of this kind of stuff. Be careful of stalemate, right? So yeah, be careful. So for that reason, yeah, maybe we go maybe we go something like this, right? You know, so you got to be careful, be very wary of stalemate. Okay, so so let's look at if the bishop takes. Okay, so now how do we win this position?
Hmm.
What do you think?
Pawn to h7.
Pawn to h7. Yeah. So this is what we call. What do we call this technique? Anybody know the name?
Deflection or distraction.
Distraction, decoy. Yeah, deflective sacrifice. Right. So we're decoying the king away from protection of the bishop, and we will win the game very easily by promoting this pawn to a queen. Right. So so in this game, after f7, black resigned. Right. So
Danilo, can
Yeah.
you go back to that point where the white king was what, on G5 or something we were talking?
oh, right here,
Where
like
was?
this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what would happen if you moved the white king up to H6? The black king would have to retreat, right?
You mean h5?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. G6.
Oh no, you can't. You can't because the king. You can't move next to the other king. You'll be putting.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking one way. I forget there's a two-way. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. Got it.
All right. Is that right? So yeah. So as you can see, bishop's opposite colored endgame very difficult to win, but you know, I mean, the only reason that this was able to be won was because of the very active king, right? This king played a very large role in this win of this bishop endgame, right? Bishop opposite colored endgame. But yeah, without that, if your opponent can establish a strong fortress, then the win would be very difficult. So the fact that white had both of these passed pawns, it's very difficult to protect both of them. And yeah, so yeah, is there any questions about this? You want me to go over a particular part of this, or what do you guys? Oh, actually, you know what? Let me go back one moment. There's something I wanted to show you here. Wait, where was it? No, it was here. Yeah, it was here. Where was that? Oh, yeah. Okay, so it was in this line. I'm just going to show you a line over here that I saw. That what if white went king f3 instead of, so remember, white went bishop a7 in this position, and then black was able to break up this whole pawn majority on the queen side, on the king side, right? So what if he went king f3? Here's a possible continuation, h5, h3. And so now the pawn state, now you see the difference here. The pawns are very nice and fluid, right? Very beautiful here. Okay, so now things go a little bit differently. So now, okay, so now this is the goal. This was the original goal, right? To push the pawns as a unit like this, right? So now, my question is, why is knight d8 a mistake, a big mistake? Why?
Whose move is it?
It's white's move. Yeah. So black just went knight d8. That was a big mistake. Why?
How about bishop to D5? Or, 5.
This one? No.
No, no,
No,
no, no.
D6.
Black
Six.
bishop to
D6.
D6.
Bishop
Yeah,
D6.
D6.
And what's that?
It's checkmate.
Checkmate.
Checkmate. Very nice checkmate. You know, in these kind of end games where there's very few pieces on the board, it's very rare to do a checkmate like this. So when it happens, it's pretty cool. But for the most part, there's not many mating threats. But still, you got to be careful of checkmate like that. Yeah, I remember with a private student, I was going over one of his games, and his opponent, I'm like, he could have made you in one move there. He could have made you in one move right there. He could, and he kept missing a mate in one. So, yeah, always keep this in mind. You know, always keep in mind, you know, which squares your opponent's king has to escape to, right? And knight d8 just cut off his escape square on d8, right? So, yeah, big mistake. Okay, so knight g5. Let's continue with this variation. Bishop d6. And now you can see now the goal is a little bit different, right? So now we got to push these pawns, make a pass pawn, and also maybe walk the king around, something like that, and invade, right? So let's see how it goes on. King f4. So now the king is going to try to walk around this way, right? King g4, bishop e2. Okay. Okay. Ooh, so that's a very nice move here. So bishop d3, hoping that he can kind of create a you know, a little hole here and block up his pawns. But this e6 is very powerful. Why? Why is that powerful? Does black have time to take this pawn? What happens? I'll make the move. What happens if black takes the pawn?
You advance the white pawn,
To where?
E7.
Yeah, e7, and the other bishop controls the promotion square. Again, demonstrating the power of the bishop pair, right? Very nice. Very nice.
Well, he
bishop.
could also, couldn't he, well, he could do that, yeah. But he
Yeah,
could
yeah.
also take the pawn, right?
Yeah,
if you-
why
if you-
wouldn't he take the
Well, if you
pawn
take the pawn, now the knight is controlling the promotion square.
off?
So you don't want to
Yeah, but
allow.
then he's got the bishop to take the knight.
That's true, but then
Mm.
after this, these pawns are traded off. Then it's a bishop against two bishops, and that's definitely a draw. You can't. I mean, maybe if you just had two bishops and your opponent had nothing, then you could checkmate. But one bishop against two bishops, that's a draw, pretty much. Yeah, you can't
Wow.
really win that. You got to be careful not to give your opponent a draw. Yeah. All right. Very good. All right. Is there any other questions in this game? What do you guys think? Observations, ideas? Did you learn anything? Did you enjoy it? What do you think?
Thought it was good.
Yeah.
Bishops are very powerful.
Yes. Yes. Oh, another great thing I think was another great lesson from this game is, which I say very often, which is when you see the possibility of a capture, do not always do a capture, right? Because again, you have to think, with this capture, will I be improving my position or my opponent's position, right? Very important that every move that you do improves your position, right?
Would
Go ahead.
you always trade a knight for a bishop?
In most cases, yes, I would. Yeah, that's because bishops are so, like you can see, look at this bishop, controls the entire, all these diagonals, right? And the knight, and especially when the position is so open like this, very few pawns, the bishops dominate, and the knight is comparatively much weaker, right? Yeah, especially when the bishops are working together like this. Like, look at this. This completely dominates the position, these two bishops. So, yeah, most cases, trading your knight for your opponent's bishop is a very good move. Any other comments, questions? Yeah, I really enjoy studying one game like in its entirety like this. I mean, do you guys feel like this, that seeing how these masters think and why they do their moves, I think is very instructive, right? What do you guys think? You feel you learn a little bit how they think, right?
Yeah.
Especially when he had a focus on the bishops, and you talked about the bishops as opposed to just going through a game.
Right. Yeah, this is very much an endgame study of the bishop pair. And again, this game won the best endgame prize, which he got his beautiful large Hungarian porcelain vase, which his wife was very happy about when she got home. When he got home. So you can't beat that, right? He was happy because he played a good chess game, and she's happy because of her vase. So cool. Yeah. All right, great. So next week we'll delve into I mean, do you guys have a preference? Let me ask you guys this. Do you guys have a preference for next week, let's say, for analyzing one game in its entirety like this, or for me focusing on a theme like, fork, skewers, zugzwang, Zwiesenzuck? Is there any preference you guys have, or whatever
Nope.
the mood strikes for me?
Whatever the mood strikes for you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yep, I vote for that.
Awesome. Great. All right, cool. So yeah, great to see you guys, and hope you guys
Yeah.
deal with the snow well, and don't have to shovel too much. I unfortunately do have to shovel. I do not have a snow blower, so yeah,
Oh man.
I got my exercise in for today, and I'm gonna get more tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Okay.
All right, so have a good night, everyone.
Be careful.
You-
Good
you
night,
too.
everybody. See you
Good
next
night.
week.
Good night.
Good
Night. Thank you.
No problem. You're welcome.